Hello, biology students. Congratulations. You have made it to day 5 of what might be 15, 20, 30 different videos that you're going to watch. This is the video for Friday, April 3rd, 2020. I'm going to cover a last bit of new information, and then I'm going to tie it all together in a weekly summary and kind of get us started on what we're going to be covering next week. So in the previous video, the one before this one, I talked about cellular respiration, the process where organisms like us, we eat nom nom the food and then break it down into ATP. But we're not the only ones that use glucose. We're not the only ones that make ATP. Plants do it, animals do it, fungi do it, and protists do it. And depending upon the type of organism, they might use that glucose in different ways to make ATP in different situations. Now, when we do it, we do cellular respiration, but these alternative ways of accessing the energy in glucose, one of them is called fermentation, which is probably something that you've heard before. It's a process that other organisms can use. In fact, we actually do a type of fermentation, but the whole point is to produce small amounts of ATP when, I don't know, maybe the ideal situation isn't there. So when we do it, we need oxygen gas there to make lots and lots of ATP. If you require oxygen to do something, like any kind of process, we call that process an aerobic process. Aerobic processes require oxygen. Think of aerobics, the type of exercise where you do this and you go, Well, that requires oxygen because we are constantly moving our bodies. We bring in so much oxygen gas to produce ATP, which is then going to be used by our muscles and our other parts of our body to keep us going through that strenuous activity with our little leg warmers and our headband. So that's an aerobic process. You require oxygen. But some processes don't require oxygen. One of those is something called lactic acid fermentation. Look at this cute, chubby dog. He's so chubby. Well, when you have very, very low amounts of oxygen, uh, our bodies will kick into this alternative method of accessing the energy in glucose to make ATP. It's called lactic acid fermentation. You've probably heard of it before because if you're an athlete, at some point you've been told that your soreness is caused by a buildup of lactic acid. Well, what happens is that your body, as it's working out, maybe you're not really used to working out at all, or you haven't worked out in a while, when you start exercising and you bring in oxygen, maybe you're not bringing in enough oxygen to meet the demands of your muscles. So your body kind of panics and goes into this alternative energy accessing pathway. It will take glucose and break it down inefficiently and make two products. It will make lactic acid and ATP, very, very small amounts of ATP. When you look at normal cellular respiration, one glucose can be turned into 36 ATP. But here, one glucose is broken down very, very inefficiently in a panic, and you produce two ATP, and that's a big difference. But you also produce a byproduct called lactic acid, and that's what causes the muscle soreness when you haven't worked out in a while or ever, as in the case when I was in 7th grade and I did off-season football for the first time. I could not move for an entire week. It was so painful. Had problems even sitting on the toilet, but you didn't know that. Anyway, this dog is probably going to be sore. He's not going to move the day after because he's fat and he's probably has been using his muscles in a while. But we're not the only ones that do this process. Bacteria, and when you make sauerkraut, the sauerkraut is made because bacteria that are naturally on the cabbage, which is delicious, they will break down the sugars inside the cabbage and produce the lactic acid, which produces the sour taste that you find in it. But they also can do it in yogurt. So any type of yogurt that you've eaten has undergone lactic acid fermentation, and the lactic acid is what gives it that sour flavor. But that's one type of fermentation. That's when oxygen's low. There is a second type of fermentation, which happens to be my personal favorite. And it's called alcoholic fermentation. Now, I know what you're saying or thinking. Mr. Pham just admitted that he's an alcoholic and he loves alcohol. Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that this process, alcoholic fermentation, is used to make one of my favorite foods. This is my favorite process of the two lactic acid or of the two fermentation pathways because it happens to make one of my favorite things ever. It is used to make bread. See, what happens is that when you make bread, you mix flour, you mix sugar, you mix milk, and then you mix the organism yeast into it. Now, yeast is a fungus, and that fungus is going to take the sugars inside the dough. It's going to start breaking it down. It's going to produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct, and that carbon dioxide gas makes the bread rise. And that's what you see there. You see that this bread is expanding. On this other thing, this unidentifiable liquid, you see that yeast is causing the bubbles inside it. I don't know what that liquid is. Use your imagination. But the fungus produces carbon dioxide. It produces ATP for the yeast, but it also produces the alcohol. And that's why uh, bread that's being freshly made kind of smells like beer. It's the yeast and the alcohol. I don't know how you know how beer smells. I'm going to assume you don't know what beer smells like, but it kind of smells like bread, or bread smells like beer. Anyway, so both of these fermentation pathways, they are what we call anaerobic processes. Anaerobic meaning they do not require oxygen. Aerobic means requires oxygen. Anaerobic means doesn't require oxygen. So that's the difference between the two. And both pathways are useful. Aerobic fermentation for us because that's how we get a tremendous amount of our ATP. But these anaerobic processes, well, we use them commercially. We use them to make foods, and organisms use it to provide ATP for themselves. So that's it on the new information, the fermentation pathways. So let's tie it all together. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, to the first video, which was all about ecosystems, having an identifiable, consistent set of biotic or living and abiotic, non-living factors. You can easily identify the living and the non-living things in this lake. Organisms live in these ecosystems because it's a system of living and non-living things. Well, if you're an organism living in this ecosystem, you've probably been there for a while. And the fact that you simply can exist there probably means that you have evolved strategies which allow you to survive. And survival is, well, it's all kinds of things. For example, organisms that are a brownish color can live in areas that are browner. They blend into the environment. They camouflage. So you are probably a good fit for that environment. It's not that the environment's a good fit for you. It's always, according to evolutionary theory, the organisms, the populations, they've evolved to live in these environments. Survival means meeting your needs. So any kind of organism, whether you're plant, animal, fungus, proteus, bacteria, doesn't matter. You have evolved strategies to live in that environment, in that ecosystem, which means that living there means meeting all of the needs necessary to keep you alive. And what are the needs for an organism? Well, shelter, food, water, and a reproductive strategy. The thing about living in an ecosystem is that there's always limited resources. So when I was in the forest, you see plants growing everywhere, but you don't see plants everywhere on the floor because as trees get bigger and bigger, they begin to spread their branches out and their leaves begin soaking up all of the sunlight. And now all of a sudden, any plants that are below them, they don't have access to that sunlight. So uh, just for plants, they are competing against each other. Even trees of the same species, plants of the same species, they are competing against each other for those resources, for space, for light, for water, to nutrients. So competition can occur with your own species or with different species and even different organisms. Uh, oh, I kind of jumped ahead of myself. Plants can even compete for mates too. You didn't know that. Plants are autotrophs. They are organisms that they do not consume other organisms for food. They instead make their own food through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide, it takes water, it takes energy from the sun to make glucose, which is their food, the food for the plants or the algae, whatever photosynthetic organisms are out there. But they also produce oxygen gas as a byproduct. And who uses that? Well, we do. The animals, other plants can even consume other plants. Bacteria and fungi, we all use what plants make. So if they're autotrophs, they make their own food. We are all heterotrophs. We must consume other organisms to meet our food and nutrient needs. Oh, look at that bullfrog. Bullfrogs are jerks, by the way. It's eating another frog. How mean. All right. So we need it for energy. We need it for nutrients necessary to replace missing things in us. We're constantly losing molecules. We're losing carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. They're breaking down. For example, I do this and I'm just losing skin all the time. I need to replace that skin. And to replace skin, I need the nutrients, the building materials, and especially the energy to do all that. And then finally, all plants, animals, proteins, and fungi, they undergo cellular respiration. Never think that plants just do photosynthesis. They actually have to break down the food that they make so they can access that energy. So bacteria, they don't undergo cellular respiration. They undergo something different. All right, last thing, photosynthesis and cellular respiration, they are two processes that are linked together in a cycle. Does that look like a cycle to you? Yeah, there we go. If this is the photosynthesis side and this is the respiration side, they link together. They are a cycle. What is made in one thing provides the materials for the next thing, and vice versa. They make energy and nutrients available for most of the life on Earth. Not all life depends upon cell respiration and photosynthesis to meet their needs, but for a good portion of the life on Earth, yeah, they are a cycle that help each other out. But they are not the only processes that actually cycle nutrients and make stuff available. There are other processes out there that may not even have anything to do with an organism, but eventually leads to the uptake of different nutrients. Things like the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. These all make very, very important nutrients available to all organisms on this earth. But that is a story for another day. So that is your review for this week. There will be a short assignment for Friday, and it will be on that Google document. So you now have a Google Doc that's going to have 5 different days of assignments. Once you've answered all 5 days, then you turn in the assignment, and then I'll have them graded, and that will be your attendance for this week. Well, that is the first week of what may be a long 9 weeks of videos. I hope you guys are doing okay. Being cooped up like this is probably not ideal. In fact, it's not ideal for everybody. If any of you are struggling, please let me know and I will try and do whatever I can to help you. You can contact me again through email, through Facebook, through Remind 101. You can meet up with me during my virtual hours, Monday through Friday, from 11 to 12 o'clock on Zoom or Google Hangouts. If you need help, please let me or some teacher know. I'm going to be checking up on you. I'll be making phone calls. I'm going to send emails if I need to, but I really would like to see you guys because this kind of sucks. And I didn't become a teacher just to speak to you through a video. I like the interaction. So if you watch this video and you're like, hey, I want to meet him during his hour, it doesn't even have to be during that hour. That's fine. But please do it. So that is it for today. Please do the assignment. I hope you have a good weekend, and I will Talk to you later. Bye.